what will happen inevitably is that there will be a lot of trade-offs. While you're trying to make things ethical, like as you add more explainability, more privacy measures, more fairness measures, it is quite possible that you are gonna lose some features. Like maybe your efficiency, your accuracy will not be as high as before. Adding more privacy may immediately mean having less transparency about the way that the information is communicated. So all of these are, there are many times, there will be many occasions where you have to do value judgments and the trade-offs, and having an ethics team working together closely with the development team is very important. And that is a very different model from, have an ethics board there. They say yes, they say no, and then they go off to the next project. That's very different.
Oh, this is great. This is really helpful and an excellent insight. So we've talked about privacy and bias and safety. Are there any other kind of ethical dilemmas that we don't know about yet, that you do know about, that we don't know about yet? Welcome to International Business Today, where we discuss the most critical issues in international business with top academic experts and thought leaders. I'm Paula Caligiuri, a professor in the International Business and Strategy Group at Northeastern University's DeMoore McKim School of Business. Today, I am so happy to be joined by Cansu Canca, the Director of Responsible AI Practice at Northeastern University's Institute for Experiential AI. Cansu is also a Research Associate Professor in Philosophy. Cansu, welcome to International Business Today.
Well, thank you, Paula. Great to be here.
So I was so excited to talk about this topic of responsible AI. We're in academia, and of course, we know a lot about ChatGPT, but AI is in a lot of other places, right?
Yeah. I think a lot of the times when we talk about AI, people think about the most recent, most exciting use case. So ChatGPT is right now the one. And it is dazzling us. It's like beyond our expectations and surprising. But all of us have been using AI for such a long time already. We have it in our phones, when you are checking your emails, when you are going from one place to another using maps, when you are searching for hotels or flights, all of those involve AI systems. When you search anything on internet or social media, you are engaging with an AI system without necessarily realizing it as obviously as you engage with a ChatGPT.
Yeah, ChatGPT are those crazy bots that are our customer service agents these days, right? Those are kind of the things that we all think about. But responsible AI. Mm-hmm. So what is that?
So it's always difficult to define things, but I think the best way to think about it is if we have something that is a part of our lives in such a strong way, it's in such an integrated way, it is very important that thing, whatever that is good for us, is serving us well. So responsible AI, we look at the AI systems for the way that the AI systems are developed, the way that they are deployed, and what goes into the AI system to make sure that these systems are benefiting us, benefiting the society, benefiting the world.
Benefiting society, benefiting the world. Well, it's pretty easy to understand that that's really important. But help us understand that. Like, why? Like, what is the risk?
Yeah, it is ambitious when we say we are going to make sure this is going to benefit everyone. But the reverse is harming on big scale. So let's just think about like some of the well-known use cases. So for example, a lot of the financial institutions use AI systems to determine individual risk levels in order to determine what is the loan how much loan that they should be giving to any individual. Mm-hmm. So if we do this well, we could break the existing discriminatory behaviors within the financial sector, which puts certain individuals in disadvantaged positions, the marginalized groups and so on. So if we do this well, it will make sure it will help many people have better financial opportunities. The flip side is if we don't do that well, we can encode way more discriminatory action items into the AI system So if the AI system is already making a bad recommendation, it's not enough when, as a financial consultant, that I have all the good intentions. I just got a really bad recommendation. I don't even know why it is bad or if it is bad. So it is really embedded in this non-obvious manner. The ethical questions are embedded in a non-obvious manner, but they impact our opportunities. They impact our decision making.
So is it that the unethical AI is really about the bias? So either the bias in the creators or the bias in the data on which the system was trained? Is it really equated to just the bias?
That is a huge part of it, but it is not only about bias.
Please tell us.
So bias really created this recognition in us we all realize that having the data and having a model to work that data out for some goal doesn't mean that you get objective results. So we realize that biases are integrated through the data, biases are integrated through the way that we had made decisions in the past. But even if we fix that, there are many other things. I think the other the spotlight topic has been privacy. Having all of that data about individuals and using AI systems to be able to identify these individuals now turned into a big topic even before the bias was in the spotlight, actually. So, all the GDPR related questions and so on. So privacy, bias, they got the bigger attention. But the way that I would put it is like the risk that we are really looking at is, on one hand, fairness related risks like distribution of resources, distribution of opportunities. The other one is about how we engage with AI systems and how AI systems help us or hinder us in our decision making. So it's more of a agency, autonomy related risk. So if you think about...
Could you give us some examples of both of those? Because those are really important to understand.
So let me go with the agency related one first. So if you think about a recommendation system that you're going to make a decision about, let's go with the same example. You're a financial advisor. You're going to make a decision about whom to give what type of loan. Well, if you are using an AI system, this is great, by the way. It's a good idea to use an AI system to understand all of these different variables and how they affect someone's way of someone's ability to repay their loans, their financial responsibilities, and so on. It is way better than just looking at the credit scores. So we want that better decision making. But as a person who is now going to make a decision using an AI system, what you really also want to understand is, are there errors that this system is likely to make? So, for example, is it likely to make mistakes on women? Is it likely to make mistakes on marginalized groups precisely because we have lacked the data about these groups for the longest time in the financial system? If a group was not engaging with the financial world, they sort of drop from the face of the earth as far as AI is concerned, right? Like there is no data, there is no group. So making sure that we understand what the system is good at and what the system is bad at allows us to make better decisions. Because if I know it is likely to make a mistake when it's dealing with a female applicant, then I can supplement it with my expertise and look at maybe further information, maybe do an interview, but do what I need to do as a human. All of that talk about human in the loop. Well, get into the loop and collaborate with the AI system so that we make better decisions.
Right. But how do we know if there's an inherent bias in the system? And how do we know to sort of slow it down when we have, say, for instance, an application from a woman or whatever?
Yeah. So that's exactly where the work of responsible AI come into play. We have to assess these AI systems to see, we have to run bias testing. We have to assess them for their fairness and make sure that first of all, make them as good as possible. But they're never going to be perfect. So also make a note on where they are likely to be not so great.
So tell us about this bias test, because that sounds fascinating.
So bias testing, well, basically, if you bring us a model and say, continuing with our example of, giving loans. Now, I started with that. I may as well continue with that example. So if you bring us the model and say, hey, is this model fair? What we want to look at is how does the model treat different groups? If there are differences in the way that first of all, for a model to make sense, it will have to treat some groups differently. Because if everybody is equal, then the model will say, give everyone a loan. So it has to be able to differentiate. So in the mathematical sense, a bias is a necessary part of the AI system. That's how it makes decisions, treating different individuals or groups differently. But what we want to make sure is that those are not unjust biases.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So it makes sense, for example, if I have been extremely financially irresponsible, I defaulted on my loans already multiple times, then the system should treat me differently than someone who has been an extremely good, financially responsible person. But if we check how the system treats different genders, and we realize that the system makes different decisions just based on gender, well, that's not justified. Why would we think that a woman is less likely to pay their loans than a man? Mm-hmm. And if there is no good argument there, then we want to get rid of that inclination in the system.
Right.
So and we see that, also in the example, my running example is just one example, but think about it in terms of, for example, hiring algorithms, right? Hiring algorithms have been plagued with this fairness issue the whole time, because you look at the historical data and women have not been historically in high-powered positions, not as often. So the system learns that CEO, unlikely to be a woman, get rid of that CV. Even when you get rid of the gender as a variable, it learns the patterns, like women tend to have gaps in their CV where they go for to have children, or they may be playing women's sports, like information that the system can gather to identify, that's not the profile. Mm-hmm. That means that as a society, we are missing out on great talent.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it's crystal clear why this is necessary in the cases of bias. And you gave two great examples, both the finance and selection and assessment. So tell us about the guidelines. So when an organization wants to use AI or build an AI-based product, what should those guidelines be so they're certain that they are producing something that has responsible AI embedded?
Right. I think, so when we think about, I'm going to change the question slightly, because I'm not sure if guidelines or the rules, they usually the question is also formed as, what are the ethical rules that we should follow, or the guidelines? I think it's broader than that. So the way to think about it is, what are the necessary elements of a governance structure that you need to put in place in order to make sure that every one of your AI products go through a AI innovation life cycle, which embeds ethics from the very beginning and keeps an eye on the AI system in some way.
Let's go through that. Let's go through that life cycle, because that's really important to understand. So right from the start, what would you encourage organizations to think about?
So initially, the very first thing, if you have the idea of using an AI system, I guess even before we get into the life cycle, I think the first thing is do I really need this, is the question to ask. Because don't complicate things unless you have to. Right. And of course, knowing that AI is very much future driven and it is becoming a part of a lot of the big companies, of course, you may have very good reasons, but for any given use case, still, I think we need to ask the question, is this going to add value? What problem are we solving? Or are we just adding a gimmick?
So let's assume that we need it.
Now we know that we need it.
Yeah, we're at the top of the pipeline.
Exactly. So now we are basically structuring our project, scoping our project. And that is the time that we want to talk to you as responsible AI people and ethics people. Because at that moment, we already know, well, know is a too strong word, but we can already foresee the main ethical issues that you may have to deal with. So for example, again, going back to the examples that we've been using, if you are going to use it for the recommendations and risk assessments, but there's a long history right now already with these type of tools, so we can immediately bring in the literature and say, look, here are the issues that we have dealt that the field has dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
What are the what should you be careful about? Do you have the right data? Do you have the right organizational structure to embed the AI system into it and so on? So we just very early on. Yeah.
We could identify what those biases are even before we begin creating the AI-based product.
Not the biases, but we can identify the risk landscape around a type of product that you are thinking about. Because a lot of the times, there are use cases already available that we can say, if it's a customer-facing chatbot using ChatGPT, we know what are the things that we should be careful about, just broadly speaking. So at that moment, we already want to have this conversation in order to understand what is the demand that you will, demand is not the right word. What kind of resources will you need in order to make this product a ethical product, a responsible product?
Okay.
And if we are seeing eye to eye, and this seems like a good idea still, then we would say the first step is to do ethics impact assessment, just to look at all the ethical concerns that may arise, talk to the stakeholders, understand where the impact falls and how critical the impact is, because it is completely different thing if you are building a risk assessment tool for allocating critical health care. It's a totally different thing if you are building a recommendation engine for movies.
Of course, right.
So the impact completely different. The importance that you have to put and what you need to learn from stakeholders is completely different. Talking to those who have not had the opportunity to get good health care will give you one storyline that you may need to be careful about and keep in mind as you are building an AI engine that will, an AI engine that will allocate different resources.
Interesting. So, okay, so we're through the pipeline kind of to the point where we're agreeing that we've spoken with the stakeholders. We now know what the potential risks could be, the ethical concerns could be. We sort of know what we like to make sure we embed from a responsibility perspective. Now what? Now we're building.
And now we are turning all of these ethical concerns and decisions, like value judgments that we made around, for example, is there a privacy concern and how critical it is? Is there a fairness concern? How critical it is? What does fairness mean for this particular model? Are there safety concerns? How critical it is? We turn them into action items in design and development. So in terms of how you choose your data set, how you choose your model, how you choose your user interface, now we want all of those ethical decisions, ethical judgments to turn into decisions. And that's the very important step. The ethics should never be separate from the technical work. It should inform the technical work.
That's a really important insight. That's a really important insight to start from the very beginning around the build of the product, getting the stakeholders' involvement, and then with that knowledge, building it to those ethical specs.
Exactly.
Really important. Is there another step in this? I would imagine testing, right?
I mean,
the last step here.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is, there will be a lot of the way that I want to describe is like ethics runs longitudinal to the whole process. So it never sort of like is hands off. There will be testing around bias, for example, and during that, we want to make sure that the ethics team or the responsible AI team is always in collaboration with the development and design and development team. If you are thinking about different types of privacy enhancing measures, you can always discuss with the responsible AI team to figure out which ones are the better ones. Because what will happen inevitably is that there will be a lot of trade-offs. While you're trying to make things ethical, like as you add more explainability, more privacy measures, more fairness measures, it is quite possible that you are going to lose some features. Like maybe your efficiency, your accuracy will not be as high as before. Adding more privacy may immediately mean having less transparency about the way that the information is communicated. So all of these are, there are many times, there will be many occasions where you have to do value judgments and the trade-offs, and having an ethics team working together closely with the development team is very important. And that is a very different model from, have an ethics board there. They say yes, they say no, and then they go off to the next project. That's very different.
Oh, this is great. This is really helpful and an excellent insight. So we've talked about privacy and bias and safety. Are there any other kind of ethical dilemmas that we don't know about yet, that you do know about, that we don't know about yet?
So I think the best way of putting this is actually, the best way of categorizing the issues is think about the main goals of humanity and society. I know I'm taking it a little philosophical now, but I'm going to get back. So when we think about ethics, what we are trying to get to eventually is to make sure that humans have their agency. We want to make sure that we reduce the harm and we increase the benefits for individuals and for the society. We want to make sure that the fairness is established. Some level of fairness is established. I know this is like a very loaded way of saying this, but then every other thing is instruments to help achieve these goals. So the core values and the instrumental values, I would say. Privacy is one instrument that we use. Consent is another instrument. Accuracy is another instrument. So bias testing is another instrument. So all of these are the instruments, and they may change according to the technology that we are dealing with and the details and so on. Yes, but in the end, our eyes are really on these like three big goals. And the reason why this is important is because like we use, when we do impact assessment, we use a structure called the box, a tool called the box, where we organize all of these different ethical concerns in alignment to these bigger goals. So we can see if we are missing out on one, why is it important? If privacy is not protected to the highest level, why is it exactly important? Because it may not be.
Right.
It might be actually way better
decisions.
Think about the, healthcare is a good example. By protecting individual health information privacy, we are reducing the speed of we can do healthcare research, right? So there is a trade-off that we are engaging with. We don't want to do this blindly. We want to make sure there's a very good reason why, and there's a very good reason why for this one, but it might not be the same for all cases.
So we're talking a lot now about doing these things for the good of society. Should there be international standards, or are there any groups working on international standards?
Absolutely. There are, the IEEE has been working on this for a long time. NIST is, of course, another group that is working on setting the standards. And of course, we have international groups. We have also national groups that collaborate really well with each other. So if you have, the guidelines that come out of EU, beautifully inform other work in the US, and this the other way around, right? And given that a lot of the major AI companies work across borders, it is really important to make sure that we are not just saying, for this country, this is the standard, but you're free in other countries. So absolutely, yes.
Yeah. And so your general advice to companies as they engage more with AI, I know you spoke a lot about, understanding ethical and responsible AI throughout the entire pipeline, and that made great sense. Is there any other advice you would say or you would give them?
Many. Many. So I think we need to understand that, when I describe the pipeline, it is a very hands-on development deployment pipeline. But you can't hold this in place unless you have executive endorsement of the idea. So making sure that the company culture is slowly, if not immediately, built around saying that responsible AI or ethics matter, and not matter only when it is super convenient and it does not interfere with any of our business goals, but it does matter, is super important. Making sure that we, all levels of company, so the developers, the designers, those who are in sales and procurement, those who are in the leadership roles, everyone understanding what is their respective roles and responsibilities related to responsible AI is very important. And I also think that having this mindset that increasingly responsible AI, risks around AI, are becoming business risks.
Right.
That is what makes your company unreliable, not trustworthy, if you are not paying attention to the obvious risks that we've been talking about, that your customers will lose trust, you will not have the competitive edge, is important. That you will have to go back and redo the AI system, retrain the AI system, which is extremely costly and time-consuming. Understanding these as business risks, I think, is very important. And again, ethics needs teeth. It needs incentives. So that's why we talk a lot to the executive level. We also talk to the board. So by telling the boards what questions they need to ask to the C-level, we are trying to put sort of like that pressure.
Absolutely.
And then the C-level has to make things happen. And only then we can really hope that this structure will hold.
And the bottom line here is that responsible AI is good for business.
Exactly.
Cansu, this was fascinating. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Paula.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us for today's episode of International Business Today. If you enjoyed it, please share it with your network. As always, we'd love to hear from you.